Hello, ladies and gentlemen. In this episode or today's video, I want to talk about Angela Merkel and former President of France's statements regarding the Minsk agreements. This article is from Modern Diplomacy, and the title is Merkel's confession could be a pretext for an international tribunal. Merkel has admitted that the Minsk agreements were just a way for the West and the Ukraine to prop up the Ukrainian army in order to fight the Russians. So, speaking in her interview for Die Zeit, published on December 7th, German ex-Chancellor Merkel said that the following: the 2014 Minsk agreement was an attempt to buy time for Ukraine. Ukraine used this time to become stronger, as you can see today. Ukraine in 2014 and 15 and Ukraine today are not the same. According to the counselor, it was clear for everyone that the conflict was suspended and the problem was not resolved, but it was exactly what gave Ukraine the priceless time. I apologize, I am still sick. So, the confession made by Angela Merkel in her interview for Die Zeit that the Minsk agreements were signed in order to buy time for Ukraine to prepare for a military standoff with Russia could be used for an investigation in a tribunal, according to Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova. And this is what she said. A lot is being said today about the legal assessment of the situation around Ukraine, about some tribunals and all kinds of things, and all kinds of that thing, she noted. This, however, is a solid bid for a tribunal. The thing that Merkel said in her interview, this is a testimony of a person who stated it directly, that everything that was done in 2014 and 15 had only one goal: to divert the global community's attention from the real problems, to buy some time, to pump the Kiev regime with weapons, and to lead the situation to a large-scale conflict. According to Zakharova, the ex-counselor's confession says the horrible fraud as a modus operandi of the West, machinations, manipulations, and all kinds of distortion of truth, law, and justice imaginable. They, Western representatives, knew it back then. In 2015, already, when they held hours-long talks, they knew that they would never implement it, that they would pump the Kiev regime with weapons, the diplomat underscored. They had no mercy for anyone: women, children, civilians of Donbass, and Ukraine in general. They needed the conflict, and they were ready for it back then, back in 2015. Germany and France must pay compensation to the residents of Donbass, says Volodin, chairman of the State Duma of Russia. He stresses the current situation in Ukraine is a consequence of the deceitful policy of the leaders of these states. First, in 2014, the German and French foreign ministers signed a conciliatory document between the legal Ukrainian authorities and the opposition as guarantors of a peaceful development of events. It all ended with a coup d'etat in Kiev and the genocide of the 6 million population of Donbass. I would be pretty careful by using the word genocide. In this case, obviously, there was persecution and killings, and I'm not denying that. It is said that around 14,000 people have been killed. I think I'm not going to say that I know this for sure, but I've heard that out of those 14,000, 5,000 of those were combatants. Hard to tell. Nonetheless, there was a very strong anti-Russian sentiment in Ukraine, or in Kiev at the time. They were bombing civilians in the Donbass. Torture was widespread. So, I mean, even Amnesty International has talked about this, which is a pro-Western NGO. groups such as the Azov Battalion, the Aidar Battalion, and the Tornado Battalion. Then Germany and France participated in the conclusion of the Minsk agreements, but as Merkel said, no one planned to fulfill them, calling it an attempt to give Ukraine time for its militarization. The pre-planned failure to fulfill the obligations assumed as the result of the signing of an international agreement is not only a loss of trust, but also a crime for which the signatories of the Minsk agreements, Merkel, Hollande, and Poroshenko, must answer. After the recognition of Merkel, Germany and France bear moral and material responsibility for what is happening in Ukraine. I apologize once again. I can barely breathe, but anyway. They will have to pay compensation to the residents of Donbass for 8 years of genocide and damage. Yes. And Hollande also confirms this. Poroshenko has confirmed this. Am I surprised? No, I am not. And, you know, Russia actually tried to implement the Minsk agreements again back in the beginning, back in April of 2022. In fact, Ukraine and Russia were very close to making a peace deal, but Boris Johnson flew to, I think it was Kiev or was it Turkey, I don't remember, but he flew over there and said, hey, you're not going to do that. You're not going to make any deals with the Russians. So, yeah, there is an obvious party to this conflict that don't want peace at all. And the military-industrial complex in the West are making a killing when it comes to this. But at the same time, they're not able to, to keep up with the production line because the Russians are destroying a lot of equipment that is entering Ukraine. Nonetheless, I want to thank everybody for listening and tuning in. Please like, share, and subscribe. And welcome to my channel, The Compassa.